This is the Roller Coaster Podcast, and I'm your host, Lucy Q. Life is a wild ride. It has twists and turns. It's scary, exciting, and downright fun. So throw your head back, arms in the air, and come along with me for the ride.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride.
Okay, before we get started, check out nectargrowth.com. nectargrowth.com. It's free to join, but not for long. Nectar is an extension of the roller coaster. It's where you can start your own journey of self-exploration and growth. In Nectar, you'll find different topics of interest, daily blogs, affirmations, journal prompts, and you can connect with some of the fantastic coaches that have been on the roller coaster. Soon, we'll be adding videos, meditations, live discussions, and events. Our signature course is a journey of self-improvement, and it's valued at $397. But once you join, it's available to you at no cost. So if you're feeling stuck, if you feel like you need to change and not sure where to start with Nectar Growth Network. Come join us. You know you're worth it. Now, let's get on with today's show.
Ride.
We all have a story to tell, and depending on the story that you're telling yourself, you may be stuck or you might be propelling yourself forward. Our stories are what makes us human, and sharing our stories can help us learn and grow, create connection, and heal. Joining me today is Brad Richard, author of Man at 50, A Journey of Crisis, Revelation, and Survival. Brad's goals are simple: help at least one person and leave his story behind for others to learn, benefit, and grow by. Hi, Brad.
Hi, Lucy. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
It's my pleasure. I can, just by the title of your book, I can relate because, I went through, my moments of crisis. I call it scraping the bottom of shit barrel to, come out the other side and know the difference. And that's part of what I'm doing here is sharing my story so that other people don't necessarily feel lost or disconnected if that's where they find themselves in their life. So, what's your story of your journey?
Well, the title "Man at 50" is very literal. Basically, the first 50 years of my life, I was codependent, and I had no masculine qualities, and I spent the first 50 years of my life being codependent on my spouses, my parents, my siblings, and I basically had no. I didn't make any decisions on my own. I was basically a child in a man's body for 50 years of my life. I am 57 now, so that tells you that I've entered into the last 7 years has been quite different. And the story is, it is an autobiography, but it takes the reader or the listener, because the book is on audiobook as well. It takes the listener or the reader through my transformation and my revelation at 50 years old that it was a time for me to step into the role of an adult. And we don't have time to go through all the specifics of that because it was very complicated, but it basically what was the turning point is I was in a 22-year marriage, and the last 22 years of that marriage, or the last 10 years of that 22-year marriage, was a relationship of cohabitating. We had no physical relationship. We just lived in the same house. And that led me down a lot of roads of seeking love and attention from others, and basically just kind of lost, did not have any place to contribute. I had no position of authority. I had no position as a father or a husband in that relationship. It was a very controlling relationship. And for the first 12 years of the 22 years, I was happy with that. And so my transition began in the last few years of that relationship, because early on I had made a promise to myself and my second child that I wouldn't walk away or abandon him like I had my first child. My first child, I walked away from his life and basically abandoned him because I had no coping skills. I wasn't a man, I wasn't a father, and I walked away from him and let him live with his mother. That did not turn out well for him or me. And so I made a promise to myself and my second son that I would stay in that relationship until he reached the age of adulthood. And then I would do something different. When he turned 19 years of age was the same time I turned 50. And I stepped out of that relationship as a very codependent entity, part of that relationship. And I stepped into my male adult place. And I left that relationship, left him with his mother, and I did keep the promise to him and myself. And then from there, I moved forward as an adult. But I was a slow learner because the first 50 years had very little of that.
Have you explored why you think you got stuck in that codependent circle? That loop that,
Yes.
you said it was your parents, it was your siblings, it was, your relationships, you're always codependent. Have you sort of explored what was the source of that all?
The source of it, absolutely, to answer your question, that was part of my transition. I came from a large family of 10 children. I was the baby of 10, and I had 9 siblings and a mother and father that they were more than willing to make all my decisions for me. And when I seeked out a wife, my first wife was 13 years older than myself. She was a mother figure, as well as my second wife. She was 7 years older than me, and she was also a mother figure. And so I perpetuated the connection I had with my mom, and I carried that on into adult relationships, but I let them run my life. And for a while, I was very comfortable with that.
When did you realize that it wasn't working for you?
When I found myself at 48, 49 years old, not having a father relationship with my youngest son, not making any decisions. And I spent my days and my nights in my room with my dog on the internet, exploring other options for affection and attention. And there was no physical relationship in the last 10 years of the 22-year marriage. So I sought out pornography and chatting and connecting with females online all night, every night, in my room, on the computer. And I was just spiraling out of control. I had a wife, I had a son. They lived in the same house as me, but I had no part in their lives. And I had no decisions that I had to make. And part of that was my commitment. No matter how miserable I was in that relationship, I would have left sooner, but I made that promise to my second son that until he was old enough, until he became an adult, I hoped that he would understand the day that I had to leave, which he didn't, but that was my hope. If I stayed and I stayed in that situation long enough, that I would be free to move on and to find the adult version of myself once he reached that age of 19. And so when he did, it was either, it was sink or swim. And I put myself in a situation where I had to force myself to make that change, because the time had run its course. He had reached 19, and it was my time to act, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It wasn't something that you felt that you could explore while still being in that house?
No, because that relationship was very controlling. Um,
It just wasn't, you
my
weren't given the space to do it.
Absolutely
Yeah.
not. No, no, I
Yeah.
was not. And for 22 years, I literally had more estrogen in my body, and my second wife had the testosterone. And there is part of my story that I don't want to get too in depth with it, because it would take too long. But the last several years, like at age 48, 49, I did a lot of soul searching, and I stepped back in the past, and I reconnected with my little me, my little Brad. And when I reached him and introduced myself to him, again, I reached a place and an agreement with him that I was going to now become an adult. I was going to be the one to protect him. No more sexual abuse, physical abuse, um, emotional abuse that he had went through. That was stopping. I was going to protect him, and that I was going to now parent myself and take care of little Brad. And it was time for me to step into that role, which he was more than happy to let me do that, because I had worn him out. And so we reconnected, we reestablished our dreams and goals together. And now, in present time, this is what I teach my clients, is self-parenting. Self-parenting and parenting your little me, and moving forward with the dreams and goals of our childhood, because that's when our little selves are the happiest and really the most productive. I find that to be the case.
What were some of those first steps that you took then, once you realized, okay, now is my time, I'm going to step away? After you made that decision, what did you do next?
Well, I used a couple of songs in that self-therapy, that I was putting myself through. Um, there was two songs, and one song was by Elvis, which when I was younger in my 20s, I actually was an Elvis impersonator, and that's what I wanted to do, believe it or not. Um, one of the songs that Elvis did was called My Boy, and I don't think he wrote it, but if you listen to the lyrics, you can go to YouTube and type in Elvis My Boy. The lyrics to that song was the lyrics that I needed to believe in and live every day, because it was the message. The lyrics was my message to my younger son. And the lyrics of that song is, I stay because of you, my boy. And so I played that as a way for me to fulfill my promise to him and myself. And the other song that I relied heavily on was by the Pretenders, and that the title of that song is I'll Stand By You. And that was my song to little Brad. and I had to sing it. I had to hear it. I had to dream about it. I got up singing it in the morning is because that was a constant reminder to him that I was going to handle it and I was going to take care of this and we were going to change the direction of our life. And so, I hope that answers your question, but those are two things that I used that were very important and that got me through that.
Yeah, and I don't think it's up for anybody to judge what tools and resources you use to create the change that you need in your life. I think what's important to focus on is that wherever you were, you acknowledged that you weren't in the best place for yourself and you took the steps to become the best version of yourself.
Yes, and there was another important factor, which goes towards your question, and that is when my father passed away. My father passed away at the end of, towards the end of that relationship. Um, my dad passed away with a lot of baggage, guilt, fear, anxiety, and absolute terror about dying. He real quick, what led up to his death is he fell in the nursing home and he had bleeding in the brain, but he also had half of his heart that was obstructed. And so his heart was struggling just to keep up. So he had a blocked heart and he had bleeding in the brain. He couldn't survive a surgery on the brain or the heart. And so me and my siblings and my mother at the time, she was alive, we made the decision to let him go. And in doing so, he was put into hospice. We were told as a family that he would last about 24 hours. He would have unlimited morphine and ice chips so that his lips and his throat didn't get too dry and make him feel uncomfortable. And they said about 24 hours and he should pass peacefully because there was nothing they could do for him medically or surgically. Well, my father lived 10 days after everything was removed. And morphine and ice chips is what he lived on for 10 days. So that really tells you the gravity or the intensity of his fear and his anxiety about leaving. He was scared to death to pass on. And that's because of his life and the things that he did. He felt guilty and he spent the last years of his life praying and crying 24/7, and that's all that was his life that he created for himself. Him and my mother separated, and so the last 2 years of his life was just praying and crying. He went from a very harsh, mean, not so nice, loving father to a teddy bear that was like a marshmallow, and he just cried and prayed. And so that was a important lesson that he taught me in his death is me and little Brad made the decision that we would not leave this world like that. And that was the beginning of, I have to tell my story. I have to leave this behind, hopefully for other people to benefit from, but I have to get that out because I refuse to take that with me. So what I do now, I do for myself, little Brad, and I also, do it for my father to give his life a little bit of meaning.
And when you look back on your journey so far, when you look back, what's one of the major takeaways or sort of aha moments that you had?
Probably the thing that I focus in on the most is I believe in my heart that we have to go back to move forward. There are so many things in the past that are extremely scary, and there some situations are so traumatic that we completely block it out. And on a conscious level, it's like I don't remember any of that, but I know there's a lot of garbage back there. But I'm not going back there because I do not want to relive that. I don't want that to be brought from my subconscious to my conscious level. And from my personal experience, when we do that, we abandon our little selves back there, and it's like, this is yours to deal with, because
Yeah.
I'm moving on, because I can't walk through that journey with you. But I have found through experience that only going back and facing those demons or those crises or the pain and becoming our best parent to ourselves as the little people is that is really the only way to heal, is to go back and address that, take responsibility for it and say, this sucked, this was terrible, this was bad, but now as an adult, it's my turn to protect my little self, my little Brad. And I had to do that for him because he would not allow me. He kept me in that spoiled little, codependent brat stage because I wasn't pursuing the dreams that we dreamt of. He still had those dreams. He still had those visions of doing great things and being somebody. And when I walked away from him, he continued to act out and keep me in a negative codependent place as an adult because I wasn't doing what he wanted me to do or what we wanted to do together. And so, for me personally, once I went back and kind of set the stage for him, he was like, finally, it's like, thank the Lord he got it. And he's going to run with this. And now he's happier because what I do now is very similar to the dreams I had as a kid. And that's to help other people, make other people laugh, cry, feel something, and do great things that they want to do. And so in essence, me and him, we're doing our dream. We're pursuing it by helping other people and becoming a servant. I took for 50 years, and the next 50 years, I want to go out serving other people. And in fact, that's what I do every day now. So
And you've
it's kind of
extended,
come.
yeah, and you've extended that in the way, because before we hit record, you said that you have a particular focus right now, and that's with veterans.
Correct. Well, I do mentoring, and several of my mentoring clients are vets. I'm an Army veteran of 7 years, which is a whole chapter in the book just about the military. And that was something to go through. But I am building, my goal is to build leaders and to build stronger people and to help them, love their little me's, whether it's a little Susie or a little Johnny, go back and love them. And I teach self-parenting. I can teach self-parenting because I've done it. I know it works, and I don't teach anything that I haven't done myself, to turn things around. It may work for most, but maybe not all. And so I shifted my focus in my podcast, and the name of my podcast is Men on a Mission, and it is specifically for men and women who have served in the military and their families, because I believe in my heart that our veterans have a seed of greatness within them. They have a sense of honor and commitment, and their oath means something. And the brothers and sisters that they served with, they were willing, and they still are, they're willing to die for one another. And so they have a strong ability to be extremely powerful leaders in their cities, their counties, their states, and in the country. But they're struggling. We're losing, 22 to 24 veterans per day to suicide, and they're lost. And that powerful, characteristic that they have as a veteran doesn't get the attention. It doesn't get, it's not seen in society, in the civilian world, as being strong. And so they get lost, and they fall into a deep, dark hole when they make that transition into the civilian world, because no one is going to be willing to die for them in the civilian world. Like their buddies and like their team members and their platoon, would be when they were in the military. So my mission with that podcast is to help them, heal them, and bring out that leadership, so that they can be strong leaders as a civilian, and they have camaraderie and they have that passion for other people in the civilian world. Because as civilians, a lot of civilians just don't get the military. Only military get military. That's just a fact, and it's harsh, but yeah.
It's a
So
different
that's
culture. It's a culture all in its own. And if you've never been in it, well, then you have no way of understanding it. It's like anything. Unless you've lived it, you don't know it.
yeah, absolutely. Experience is the essence of understanding. Is a phrase I use, and so what I have done, and what I do with my speaking, and I've written 2 other books that I co-authored, with Blue Talks, and the Mental Mechanics Guide, Guts, Grit, and the Grind. I've co-authored 2 other books as well. My whole purpose now is to help men and women become leaders, and they can take that leadership in whatever direction they want to, that follows their dream and kind of falls in line with what they want to do, whether it's sports, whether it's teaching young kids to play baseball or whatever their dream was. um, they can do that, but they have to, number one, stay alive, number two, realize that they're important, and they have to love their little me's a lot, because the vets that are committing suicide today, their fear and their loss of hope and that black goo that they're facing prior to attempting suicide, is their little person screaming, and they're scared. And the way an adult deals with that sometimes is very negative, and we're losing too many. So, that's my mission, and that's what I do with my podcast. That's a long answer, but hopefully that answered your question. But that's where I'm going with my leadership building and my veteran podcast.
That's certainly an important mission. Brad, if people are looking at connecting with you or getting a copy of your book, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
I literally have put everything on the website. The about page is there. All 3 books are there. My speaking, my virtual speaking that I've done, my mentoring, the podcast, that's all there. If you have veterans that happen to listen to your podcast, I really offer a tremendous amount of free stuff to veterans. I have a video course, an audio course that's free. I do my mentoring and my coaching with them for free. I don't charge veterans for my mentoring. And the content that I have available on the site is absolutely free for veterans. So, if you're a veteran listening to the Roller Coaster podcast, come to my site and get some free stuff, because I can't, my conscious, my heart won't allow me to charge anything, when I'm working with brothers and sisters. I'm a 7-year Army vet. And so, that's just giving back to them and helping them in any way. So, bradrichard.net is the website. You can do the www or you can do the HTTPS, but it's bradrichard.net. And that's probably the best one-stop shop to get connected with me. My LinkedIn and my Twitter are on the site. And I have a YouTube channel that's connected to the podcast. And there's literally tons and tons of different things there at the website. A lot of drop-down menus. So there's probably way more than most people would want at the site, but I've got everything at one place.
Well, if you're listening and you're looking at connecting with Brad, make sure you check out the show notes. I'm going to have all of his links in there. And Brad, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your story.
You're welcome. And my last thing that I have to say is this is the way I end my podcast. Love your little me, take care of them, and treat them like they need to be treated. And they really need you to, they more than anyone else, they need you to love them more than anyone else in the world.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. Want to chat or share your ideas about today's show? Pop me an email at hello@therollercoasterpodcast.com. Don't forget to connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at The Roller Coaster Podcast. Our theme song, Roller Coaster, was performed by The Lucky Setback. Audio editing by the one and only Jeff Quigley of Quigley Creative.